What's thrilling for me is that this is evidence that I'm not standing still.
I'm Stoney Lamar. I live in Saluda, North Carolina, 35 miles southeast of Asheville. It's a little town of about 650. It's the first mountains you come to coming up out of South Carolina, Piedmont. There's a 1,000-foot elevation difference between Saluda and Tryon, North Carolina, which is 8 miles down the mountains. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a college town. My mother was ill. She'd been ill all my life. 1960s, I ran a little wild as a result of her not having the oversight that she normally would have. Got involved in drugs and alcohol, and made a decision on my own after my sophomore year in high school that I needed to get out of there. I went to a school in Rome, Georgia called Darlington School. For whatever reason, they gave me more responsibilities than I had ever been given before, and it worked for me. I wound up graduating from high school and going to Carolina. Now, I didn't stay at Carolina but 1 year. I had way too good a time. I was on the 10-year plan. Between 1970 and 1979, when I graduated, I spent 2 years in alternate service for the draft, working in a children's mental health hospital in Atlanta. I was 5 hours away from a degree in psychology, and I thought my life's work was going to be working with the mentally ill, and I realized that I couldn't do it. I had too much empathy. I was concerned that there's a thin gray line that separates those of us that think of ourselves as sane and those of us that are identified as not sane. And I felt like it was too tenuous a line for me to continue with that work. The illness with Mom was important in that I came to understand that she believed that beauty was a balm to her. That's influenced my work. I've always felt like I wanted to make work that was beautiful. It had a profound effect on me, how she felt about the importance of having beautiful things in our lives. So that's what I wanted to do, to make beautiful objects. Some 30-odd years ago, I graduated from Appalachian State University thinking that I would make furniture for a living. My wife and I were both in the woodworking program there. At some point, I borrowed a friend's lathe and immediately fell in love with the process, understanding that I was much better suited to the kinetic, rhythmical aspects of wood turning. I started buying lathes and selling the furniture making equipment. At the same time, we were having children. I took the first wood turning class in 1981 with Mark Linquist. The next year, took a class from David Ellsworth. In 1984, Mark invited me to come up and be his apprentice. So we moved to Henniker, New Hampshire. 2 children, one of them 3 months old, and I went to work for Mark, which proved to be one of the more fruitful years of my early career because I came to understand there through Mark's work, the way he represented who he was through his work, that I could in fact use the lathe to talk about who I was and represent my aesthetic. I came to understand that everybody sees the world differently from everybody else. And it's important to know that it's okay to see the world differently. That gave me the freedom to start attempting to make the kind of work that I'm making. And I have to say Mark's work had the same effect in that people did not like it. It was rough, there was chainsaws involved, and he stood up and made the work that he wanted to make, which is what I've done. I began explorations into multiple axis turning, which I would describe the lathe more as a carving tool as opposed to a tool that turns round objects. They started off as vessel referenced pieces. The vessel in a lot of different religions is an important aspect. The communion cup, for example. Still making vessels, but elevating the vessel off the surface as if it were ritualized and used in ceremony. In terms of the art that I look at and the art education, it's been on my own. Where should I start? I look at the Cycladic figurines from the Aegean Sea, Fletcher Benton, Barbara Hepworth, of course Brancusi. A lot of the truth and material guys. A guy named Alexander Archipinko, goes on and on and on. Barnett Newman, Matisse.
Just been to MoMA to see the Matisse cutouts show. I'm just completely blown away by it. The people that hang that work, they talk about the number of pinholes in each one of those cutouts that he's made. And that is him adjusting. Rearranging the work. When you see something like that from someone of that stature, that really gives you permission to say, okay, let's step back and take another look at this. This might work better here. So this piece, I had it made and painted, and it was 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, and I didn't like it. And the piece was due Monday at noon to a show in Nashville. And I called Susan up, and I said, I need you to come down here and look at something without giving away too many secrets. She has a way of kind of, and I'm like, it's too busy, isn't it? She said, yeah. And so I sandblasted the surface completely off and repainted it. And that's the Matisse thing. It's okay to go back and redo something.
One of the things about sculpting in wood is everybody has some relationship to the material. It might be your grandmother's stove bowl or what you see when you're splitting wood. And so they come to the show with kind of a preconceived notion about what is a good use of wood and what is not a good use of wood. The most challenging thing for them as far as my work is concerned is that the fact that most of the work is painted. Unlike other materials like steel and clay, wood just seems to have a universal warmth to it that people respond to, and so the paint takes the wood and transforms it. So now people look at the form first. My hope is it draws them in, and then upon further investigation understand that it actually is wood. I have had people ask me before looking at it closely, is this stone? As far as paint's concerned, I'm using milk paint. It's milk byproducts, calcium carbonate, lime, and earth pigments. I mix in golden acrylics with it, so I got a much wider range of colors and palette that I can work with. There's a lot of people that don't like it, but it works for me.
From a technical point of view, when you sandblast what's referred to as a ring porous material, ash or white oak or something like, which are the two materials that I use most, the summer growth lasts deeper than the winter growth. So then when you come back and you sand back through, the paint will lay down in the summer growth. What it does for me is it pays homage to what I think is the most beautiful thing about the material that I choose to work, and that is that it's living. It has a rhythm. It's spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. You can see the grain interacting with the texture that I've applied.
One of the things I like to think about in some of the work is the circus. A lot of articulated movement and balance. Music plays a large part in my work. I oftentimes will name a piece using a musical reference a third of the way in or halfway in, and then that musical reference tends to inform the development of the piece. One of the early ones was Someone to Watch Over Me, Birdland. And what that does is it places it in the context of a time when I was listening to that particular music. Geometry plays a big part in the development of the work. I see the world through an isometric lens, so I break it down into planes. The figurative references are obviously abstract. There's no intent to make them overtly sexual. I do know that people see that in the work from time to time. Some of them are forest-like. There's a seagrass triptych over there. Seven Sisters refers to constellation, but also refers to the Seven Sisters Black Mountain Range, which is part of my DNA. The mountains around me are some of the oldest in the world, so it gives you a permission to move slowly and to not be brash about your work. One of the things about the early work, it had what I would call a tenuous relationship to gravity. They were finely balanced, and maybe a little bit too finely balanced for certain environments. Six years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And now, as a response to the Parkinson's, I'm making work that is much more stable, larger feet. Not only the positive stuff, but the negative stuff is represented in the work as well.
One of the ways that the Parkinson's is showing up in my work is I'm a big fan of Barnett Newman's work and the idea of the physical being on one side of that painting and the metaphysical being representing the other side. So I've kind of taken that idea and in some of the work inserting what I call a wellness line, which is the disease on one side, which is the physical, and me on the other side pushing back. And it's a way for me to sort of document the progression of the disease and also document how I'm resisting that progression. If you look at this piece, a well-lit dark path, and it's referring. See, this is really subtle, but you can see there's a line that's created by the negative space here, and if you have a chronic disease. There's a lot of information out there about it, so it's well lit. You know what's going on, but it's still, if you allow it to become such, it can be a pretty dark path to go down, regardless of how well lit it is. Also think about the texture sort of representing those that are around that dark path, helping kind of like the waves.
The illness with Mom was important in that I came to understand that she believed that beauty was a balm to her. profound effect on me and how she felt about having beautiful things in our lives. So that's what I wanted to do, to make beautiful objects.
You can see many of Stoney Lamar's beautiful objects at Philadelphia's Center for Art in Wood, as well as the Snyderman Works Galleries, through April 18th, 2015. I am standing here with Susan Casey, who I think may be married to Stoney. Mm-hmm. And what kind of husband is he?
We've been married for almost 36 years. He's a great husband.
Are you a wood turner as well?
No, I actually own a restaurant.
What kind of food?
Mediterranean.
What does Stoney think?
He loves it. He can go down and get lunch and beer and fresh roasted coffee anytime he wants.
What kind of beer?
He's an IPA fan.
Oh, I am too.
Bell's Two Hearted.
Where do you get that?
The brewery's in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but
It's my go-to IPA.
Can you buy it online?
I'm sure you can find it here somewhere.
What is it called again?
Bell's Brewery. It's two-hearted. It's got a couple of trout on the front of it.
Here's to you, Stoney Lamar, and all your beautiful objects.